tomatoes, there are several different definitions that are really important to learn first off. You know, Tomato varieties are divided primarily between determinate and indeterminate varieties. And you'll also hear us talk about heirloom varieties and hybrids. First off, with the determinate and indeterminate, tomatoes come from a wild vine in South and Central America that will live for several years, and it's a great big sprawling plant that spreads out all over the place. The indeterminate varieties are closer to that original wild tomato in that it will just keep on growing until the frost kills it. It has an indeterminate life cycle. The determinate tomatoes, there are a whole lot of new heirloom or new hybrid varieties that have been developed by commercial growers that don't get as large. We'll see some really beautiful celebrities in a little bit, or some hybrid Romas. They work beautifully, but they will not live all through the summer. They have a determined life cycle. They're not going to get quite as large. Right here, we have an heirloom variety called yellow brandywine. It's a wonderful, big, old yellow tomato. Very, very tasty. These things have almost reached the top of their 6-foot posts, and they will just keep on growing, and they will literally drape over to the ground before the frost kills them in late October or November. And that's okay. So all of the indeterminate tomatoes, you've got to anticipate that they're going to get quite large. Folks growing them in greenhouses have to anticipate that those vines can get 20 feet long. These are a newer hybrid variety. Well, it's actually an older hybrid variety called Better Boy. It's a standard that's really, really an important tomato for producers. It's a good sized red slicer. It's got a tremendously wonderful taste. Better Boy, it's one of the primary tomatoes down in Hanover County that have made Hanover County the tomato capital of the world. But these vines will get every bit as large as the heirlooms around me. You need to try different varieties. The great thing about a lot of the hybrids, like these Better Boys, is that they tend to be more disease resistant. These yellow brandywines or the striped Germans that we grow, those are two of our main heirloom varieties. They are both prone to splitting. They will grow some really odd shaped fruit. They're really tasty, but you might have to chop that tomato up into 5 pieces to get something, because it's got all kinds of lobes and the splitting and cracking can be a real problem for commercial growers. For us here at the education farm, if I'm putting a split tomato in a tomato box that's going to a food bank that might not be distributed for 3 days, well, that split tomato can make a big gooey mess. If I instead am growing these heirlooms, if I'm growing the hybrids, the disease-resistant hybrids, you get a whole lot less cracking. You get a whole lot less fruit that we're throwing away. You get a good, smooth-skinned, really tasty tomato. It is not true that only heirlooms taste good. What we are used to buying in the store is a tomato that was picked 4 or 5 days ago and has been shipped and refrigerated and picked really early. Any tomato basically that you allow to sun ripen out there is going to be a really, really good one. I love the taste of a lot of my disease-resistant hybrids. Okay, right here we've got two different varieties of hybrids that are both determinate tomatoes. These are Celebrity. Celebrity has been around for a long time. It's a medium-sized red slicer. It's just an outstanding tomato. But you can see that the posts here are much shorter. It's a lot of work to keep on tying up the tomatoes for those great big long indeterminate varieties. It's one of the reasons why commercial growers like the determinate varieties, like these Celebrity. It is a fantastic tomato. Now some of those, the indeterminates, they will still be producing in October, and these Celebrities will be gone by then. Not because we're doing anything wrong, but that's how it's been commercially bred. It's a fantastic tomato. It's a lot less work, and it's got a great disease resistance package, which means that it's still gonna get some late blight. Almost every tomato. There's 60 different fungal and bacterial diseases tomatoes get here in Virginia. So you're going to see it, but your heirlooms are going to have a whole lot more disease pressure than most of your determinate hybrids. These over here are a fantastic, if you're canning tomatoes, making tomato sauce, making your own ketchup, whatever. This is a small Roma called Pony Express. And just as the name implies, Pony Express means it comes out, produces really, really heavily. It's got what we call a concentrated fruit set, which means that it won't produce fruit for a long time. It'll produce a whole lot of fruit early in the season, and then the vines die. And that's okay, because we're going to get a tremendous yield out of these Pony Express. This is a commercial hybrid. When you're buying canned tomatoes, when you're buying ketchup, an awful lot of times what you're buying are Pony Express. And the yield is just phenomenal. And again, I'm not going to have to keep on tying them up and tying them up. These plants are going to stay small. And the fact that they die off early in the season means that I can put in a fall crop right in this same space. A lot of the disease-resistant hybrids are really, really great tomatoes to consider. Right now we're going to talk about how we keep our tomatoes tied up. You don't want to let your tomatoes sprawl out on the ground. That's an invitation for disease. It's tough for weed control, and it's harder to find the fruit. This Florida weave is a method of tying that is so much better than using commercial tomato cages. We have 2,800 tomato plants this year, so we're not going to put cages around every single one of them. Plus, a tomato cage kind of confines your tomato close together. A Florida weave will allow there to be really good air circulation. When they are confined in that cage, that's an invitation for disease to really set in. One of the things that's really important with the Florida weave is that you use the nylon, the polypropylene twine. I know a lot of people want to avoid plastics, but the natural twine, it doesn't hold up. As soon as it gets damp with the morning dew, it will stretch out and it just won't hold your tomatoes up. This particular patch was planted several weeks, almost a month later than the other ones. We do that intentionally so that we have one variety or one patch that comes on, tomatoes produce like crazy, and then they slow down some. And by the time the other patch is starting to slow down, these will be peaking. So these are short plants. We've already gotten one line on, but it is time to add another one on. And early on, I want to put this about 6 inches above the plant. You know, as it comes up farther, I can go out and space them out about a foot. And, you know, what you want to do is capture your tomatoes. You know, you don't want to put your lines in above them because they won't grow between the lines. You know, it is far easier if you add a new line as you're going up. So I've gotten the line through this piece of PVC pipe. We have different lengths of PVC pipe. This is a long one so that I can reach way down there. And then as they grow up farther, and I don't have to reach down as far, I've got shorter pieces of PVC, and then the top one, you don't even need the PVC. So I'm going to stretch out a little bit of line. Florida weave, what is really important is trying to get that line in there really tight. You want to get it to where you're using the strings to hold up the tomatoes. You want it tight, and I'm using the PVC to wrap it around the post. And then I move down to the next one. And I use the PVC to wrap it around the post, and I'm really trying to get some tension on it. A great thing for me is that I can use this long piece of PVC to reach down to try to capture those tomatoes. It goes really quickly once you've done a few 100 miles of it, like I have. And you'll see right here, when I pull that string up, I can pull those tomatoes in, and I'm creating a nice flat wall. I'm going to tie it off right here. Anytime you see something that you need to fix, you can just stop and tie it off to try to get your tension. And today, I'm just demonstrating on a short section. So we're going to come right back up. And I'm going to add another line on the other side of the tomato, right about the same height as the first one. I'm going to pull it tight, and I'm capturing those tomatoes so that eventually I will have a nice flat wall. I'll be able to see the fruit really well. If ever I wanted to, I usually don't spray tomatoes, but if I wanted to, it's far easier to spray them. But the biggest advantage is that I'll get less disease pressure because these tomatoes have really excellent airflow around it. You don't have to tie any kind of fancy knot. I just use any kind of granny knot as long as I am holding the tension. that's a Florida weave. Tomatoes really lend themselves very, very well to container garden. I've got one good friend who's got an extensive garden in 5-gallon buckets with holes drilled in the bottom for drainage. Large flower pots work well, but I'm really excited about these grow bags that have been offered in the recent years. These were originally filled with mushroom compost. This year we added in some more compost from alpaca poo, composted alpaca manure. But tomatoes will lend themselves if you've got a large flower pot. You cannot let it go dry, and if it gets really dry, it will get stressed out. There are good watering systems if you cannot get out there and water. We use a drip irrigation system, which is just super easy, that, delivers a little bit of a stream of water right into the soil. I find that if I run it for about an hour and a half each day, I've got way more than enough. You can control your soil. If you're living in an apartment and you've got a little deck, a small limited space, don't think that tomatoes are out of your reach. Tomatoes do really well in containers, and grow bags are the cheapest containers you can get. When we were putting up this greenhouse, we were thinking about raised beds, but timber prices had just exploded. And the idea of putting everything in in grow bags saved us money on the construction, saved us money on the soil that went in there. It took far less, and it gives me the flexibility to move things around or rearrange it if I need to at any point. Think about grow bags. They're really easy. Okay, these tomatoes are planted into woven landscape fabric. Woven landscape fabric is one of the keys to success for every home gardener. The first time somebody offered me some, I told them I didn't want to put plastic in my garden. Now I put down acres of this stuff. It is woven, so rainwater can go through it. You can see down here I've got my drip irrigation right on top of it. But this will eliminate about 90% of my weeding. It really makes a tremendous difference in the success of tomatoes in particular. Tomatoes and landscape fabric go together beautifully. You don't need any special equipment. We roll out the landscape fabric and staple it in with metal staples that we're driving in with a rubber mallet. You can use this stuff year after year after year. I do pull it up each year and I move things around. You don't want to plant your same crops in the same place every year. You want them, even in a small garden, moving it around a little bit. But the landscape fabric is holding moisture under the ground. It's preventing the top of the ground from drying out, and it's keeping weeds down. And it works. It works really, really well. And you don't need any special equipment to do it. So, for home gardeners, I strongly recommend this. Not just for tomatoes, it works beautifully for summer squash, beans, just about anything you want to put in the garden. The landscape fabric will make your life easier. All right, this particular cultivation method, we call it conventional plastic. You do need a pretty expensive piece of equipment called a bed layer that will shape this raised bed. It will stretch the plastic over it and tuck it in on the edges, and it also puts a piece of drip tape up the middle of it when it's going in. This works really, really well. One person with the tractor and the right equipment, you can put in acres of these plastic beds. most of the produce you buy at the grocery store is grown on this conventional plastic. There are downsides, which is that this plastic can only be used once. It ends up in the landfill. There are biodegradable films that you can use. They don't work really well on tomatoes because they're out here for a long season and it starts breaking down before the season is over. But the conventional plastic, it's worth researching. They've got it down to where bed layers are about $2,000 now, but you still need a fairly good sized tractor to pull it through the soil, and you've got to really plow that soil up really finely in order to get the bed layer to work. It works really well, but it's not great for the soil. Okay, the proper planting dates for tomatoes, for many, many years, tomatoes are very, very frost sensitive. If you put them out too early, a late frost can come along and wipe you out. So for many years, we've considered Mother's Day, typically, about the 10th to 14th of May is the best time to put out tomato transplants. Tomatoes grow really slowly at first, so most people are not putting seeds in their garden, they're putting transplants out, and everybody wants that first BLT of the year, so they want to put out a 6-week-old transplant in the middle of May, which means that starting them in the greenhouse or in a sunny spot in your house where you can protect them from the cold, plant those seeds into your seed trays about the 1st of April, and that way you'll have the right proper size seedling that can go out after the frost. Now, watch your weather carefully. Climate change means climate instability, and for 3 years in a row we had late frost on Mother's Day. You can put out a few tomatoes as long as you can protect them. If you've got a frost, putting a 5-gallon bucket over a tomato plant will keep it protected on a frosty morning. It won't do that in April, but in May, to protect it from those last few mild frosts, start your seeds around the 1st of April and don't transplant into the field until after Mother's Day.